Hey fiddlers, welcome to today's fiddle video. Today we are going to be talking about why scales and arpeggios are not just for our classical friends, they are also for us fiddlers. Hear me out on this one. I know it's not an easy sell. There is a chance that you are a fiddler because you hated doing scales and arpeggios when you were first starting to learn the violin and you wanted a break from that, and fiddling seemed like just, you know, freedom and sort of anarchy in a pleasant way. In this video, I'm going to take you through 3 ways that scales and arpeggios are helpful for fiddlers, make our fiddling lives better. We're going to talk about how they can improve your sound overall, how they can help you learn new tunes, and also how they can help you play backup and improvisation. And at the end, I'll give you an idea of a few of the main scales and arpeggios you might want to be practicing. It's kind of a blustery, stormy day out there, so if you hear some blustering, that's what's happening. So first off, let's just clear up what's a scale and what's an arpeggio. Often when we're talking about scales, we're talking about an 8-note series. Wow, it just got really windy out there. We're talking about a series of 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a D major scale. It starts and ends on a D. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. And what makes it sound major as opposed to minor, Dorian, Mixolydian, etc. is the intervals between the notes, how much space we have between the different notes in the scale. We have some whole steps which have a little more space and half steps which have a little less space between the notes. So a whole step looks like this, and a half step looks like this. So there's a bigger space here and a smaller space here. In a major scale, you start with a whole step, another whole step, a half step, a whole step, whole step, whole step, and half step. Alright, so that's one kind of scale. What about arpeggios? When we talk about arpeggios, often what we're talking about is playing the first note of the scale, so in this case that open D, the third note of the scale, which is our second finger actually here, F sharp, and the 5th note of the scale, which is the open A, and then you might also play the last note of the scale, which is kind of the same as the first note. It's a D, 3rd finger on the A string. Alright, so that's a basic idea of what a scale and an arpeggio might be. Alright, so how are scales and arpeggios helpful to us? First of all, they can be a great training ground to help you improve your technique and improve your sound as a fiddler. You can use scales and arpeggios to work on intonation, so playing in tune, or rhythm, or ornamentation, or bowing. They're just super helpful, just kind of a simple way to work on those things. So for example, if you want to practice playing in tune in the key of D, you might find a D drone note online, get it going, and then try playing your scale and arpeggio along with it, trying to make sure that you're getting the notes just right, getting them right in tune. Here's how that might sound. You could also practice different rhythms on your scales. So you could practice a real rhythm, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Or you practice a jig rhythm, 6/8 time, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can practice techniques like relaxation or bow hand setup or left hand setup and just focus on that throughout the scale or the arpeggio. It's just a relatively simple series of notes, so you don't have to worry about all the different sequences of notes you might find in an actual tune while you're working on those concepts. You could do different slurring patterns, like slurring 2 notes at a time. 4. Slur 2 separate. 1, that'll help you develop the muscle memory and also just the control over when you are slurring and when you're not. You could also use scales to work on ornamentation. So if you're working on rolls, you could do an entire scale of rolls. Covering all the fingers. Okay, so those are some ways that playing scales and arpeggios could be a good training ground for just overall sounding better. The second thing I wanted to talk about is how scales can help you learn a new tune. I think this can apply whether you're learning a tune by ear or looking at sheet music on a page. If you know the key of the tune you're in and you know the scale that you're in, you know generally where your finger placements are going to be. So for example, if a tune is in D major and you've been playing your D major scales, you'll know that you have basically your normal finger placements on the D and A strings, and also a low second finger on the E, because you'll know what the notes are in the scale and what that is supposed to sound like. So you know that you'll never have to worry about finding a low second finger on the A string. It'll always be generally one of those notes. There can be exceptions. Sometimes you'll find a few stray notes in a tune that aren't technically in that key with little accidentals, but we're not going to worry about that. So for example, if you're playing the tune Harvest Home, you'll know you have no low second fingers there. But when you get to this part that has a second finger on the E string, it's going to be low. It's not going to be. So it just narrows down your options. The other thing is that scales and arpeggios are all over the place in fiddle tunes. So if you've been playing your scales and your arpeggios and you hear it in a tune you're learning by ear, or you see it on the page in the sheet music, you'll know just what to do. Harvest Home basically starts out with some arpeggios. If an arpeggio is, here's the beginning of Harvest Home, just notes from the arpeggio, rearranged a little. Then this sounds a little bit scale-ish. Then we've got, and then sort of a scale going down. You get the idea. And you hear scales and arpeggios in so many other fiddle tunes. Other tunes that include scales and arpeggios are tunes like Fisher's Hornpipe. Starts right off with an arpeggio. St. Anne's Reel. We've got notes from the D arpeggio right here. Then you've got Red-Haired Boy. Which has a part of a scale right at the start there. Overall, I think that playing scales and arpeggios just gives you this familiarity with the fingerboard, which is super helpful, I think, when you're learning a new tune. Thirdly, knowing your scales and arpeggios can really help when it comes to playing backup in the form of double stops or improvisation. Arpeggios are basically broken chords, so if you know the arpeggio for a particular key, that means you can figure out the double stop for that key. So if you want a D chord, for example, and you have your D arpeggio, all you gotta do is choose 2 notes from that arpeggio, play them on adjacent strings, and you have yourself a chord. So in this case, you've got D, F sharp, and A. You can choose any 2 of those. So for example, you might just choose open D and open A. That's your D chord. Or you might choose open D and A down on the G string. Or you could try that A down on the G string, but with the F sharp on the D. With improvisation, which I don't do a whole ton of in Celtic music, but it's more common in something like bluegrass, often what you've got is a series of chords that the chord instruments are playing, and you get to decide what to play over that chord progression. So for example, if you have a chord progression that goes D, G, A, D. You can base your improv on the arpeggios for each of those keys. So it could go something like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are some ways that I think that scales and arpeggios can be helpful to us fiddlers. And lastly, I just wanted to share with you some of the scales and arpeggios that may be the most helpful to know. You'll find a whole ton of fiddle tunes that are in G, D, or A major or mixolydian. Major and mixolydian are pretty close. Here's a D major scale. Here is a D mixolydian scale. It's just that second to last note that changes. You'll also find a bunch of fiddle tunes in A minor or E minor or Dorian. Here is an E minor scale. And here's an E Dorian scale. Just that sixth note of the scale that changes between minor and Dorian. So those are some keys to get you started. The thing is that once you get the hang of what a major scale sounds like, what the intervals sound like, and the same thing for a minor scale, mixolydian scale, Dorian scale, the hope is that you're going to be able to start on any note, and if someone says play a major scale, you can do it because you'll have in your head what it sounds like. Whew, that wraps up today's fiddle video. I know it was a doozy, but I hope you got some good stuff out of it. Have a wonderful day and happy fiddling.